Wonderful. So I'd like to call the MWPA board meeting of January 20th, 2022 to order. Lori, will you please call the roll to ensure that we have a quorum present?
Thank you. Director Molesworth,
Here.
Director McEntee,
McEntee, here.
McEntee.
Thank you.
You guys will have to probably help me with last names. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
Director Kurtz, is it Kurtz?
Kurtz, Rachel, here.
Director Paulson,
Here.
Director Rodani,
Here.
Director Donahue,
Here.
Director Barry
Evergett's here.
Evergett's, thank you.
Here.
Director Shea,
Here.
Director Paul, how do you say that last name?
Thank you for even trying, Jeske.
Jeffy, thank you, Paul. Director Goins, or Chair
Here.
Goins,
Here.
Director Finn. Director
Here.
Thompson, thank you.
Here.
Director Hillard,
Here.
Director White,
Here.
Director Ravasoni,
Ravazio?
is that what it is? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's all right, close.
Okay, is it Director Kohler?
Yes. Here.
Thank you. Director McMillan
Here.
and Director Bruto, is it Bruto?
That's it.
Thank
And I am
you.
here.
All present, thank you.
Thanks you, Lori. Thanks, everyone. And welcome, Lori,
Thank you.
to our team. Item number 3, agenda adjustments. So I'll entertain requests to adjust the order of the agenda. Any requests? And I'm seeing none. This is item 4, where board member updates on issues or policies relevant to MWPA. And I'd like to welcome our new board member, Claire Molesworth. Welcome. Become highly recommended by David. And I understand, Julie McMillan, are you going to help? Are you going to introduce Claire?
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure to welcome Claire Molesworth, who is our newest board member and taking over for David Kimball, representing the Bolinas Fire Protection District. Claire currently serves as president of the Bolinas Fire District and has served on the Bolinas Fire Board since 2018. She is a graduate of Barnard College in New York City, where she majored in history, and a graduate of Seattle University School of Law. She practiced litigation with the Seattle law firm for many years, where she became a partner. Since 2017, she has worked at as counsel at Square, the financial services company based in San Francisco that many of us use almost daily. I was asked to get information from Claire for 3 different questions. So the first question was, why did Claire become an elected official? Claire served on several nonprofit boards when she lived in Seattle. She wanted to continue her public service as an elected official while getting to know her Bolinas community. And her husband is also very involved in Bolinas, where he serves as president of the Bolinas School District. Number 2, what 2 to 3 unique skills does Claire bring to the MWPA that will help us be successful? Claire brings a West Marin perspective and lens to our agency. As a litigation attorney, she is unflappable and brings calm to situations, along with a solution-based perspective. And I know from talking with her last week, she is a very good listener. And lastly, what fun fact about Claire should we know about? In the early 2000s, after she finished college, Claire lived in Dublin, Ireland, and worked in a restaurant. There, she was robbed at knife point. She got to testify in Dublin twice against the brother of a famous crime boss, which helped result in his conviction. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks, everybody. I look forward to working with you. I'm really happy to be here. And I'll tell you more about that story if anyone asks me.
I'm sure the opportunity is going to come. So Claire, thank you so much. Thanks for volunteering. we so look forward to working with you. And thank you, Julie, for the introduction. Let's move on to item 5, time for public expression. Public's welcome to address the board of directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. And please be advised that pursuant to government code, the board is not permitted to discuss or take any action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And I would ask all present to silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your mic when not reporting out. So do we have any members of the public that would like to make a statement at this point in time?
Are there any members? Please raise your hand. I see no hands raised.
Okay, thanks all. Thanks attendees. Let's move on to item number 6, which is the executive officer's report. The executive officer, Mark Brown, is going to provide the staff with a report on this. Welcome, Mark.
Good afternoon, President Goins, board members. So, we've been talking a lot about rain, and we have been having a nice interval of rain and dry. And so far, we've been in a pretty prolonged dry period for the last couple of weeks. I hope that we see some rain coming up again. We've been seeing just remarkable recoveries in the fuel moistures in the smaller and medium fuels, but the large fuels continue to be dry. And I hate to be the fearmonger and the typical firefighter that says we're going to have the worst fire season ever. But historically, after a drought and a drought-breaking rain, historically we have one of the worst fire seasons, and that's because the heavy fuels just haven't been able to recover, and now we have abundant light fuels to move into those heavy fuels. Hopefully, we'll see rain return to our forecasts. I do know we are getting a wind advisory for tomorrow and Saturday through Sunday, actually. Should be minimal threat for us when it comes to fire threat, because we still have the moisture on the ground, and we don't have the live fuels and the small fuels that are available to burn into the medium or heavy fuels. So I feel comfortable with that, but that kind of segues us into the Colorado fires in Boulder. December 30th, but they actually were in the second driest period of July through December that Boulder has experienced. And they had up to 115 mile-an-hour winds. So that is really hard for any control efforts to be successful. But we are seeing early indications that it was early home ignition in the fires that caused the spread downwind. So our tactic, our house out approach of really trying to work hard to prevent home ignitions in the first place, I think played out in this situation. Had they been able to prevent those early home ignitions, perhaps a conflagration wouldn't have been as bad. We do want to emulate a program that is going on in Boulder. However, the program we want to emulate is on the west side of Boulder County, whereas this fire is on the east side of Boulder County. And this is really a partnership with the homeowners, the fire agencies, and insurance companies, that if people who have done their defensible space work will get a certificate saying they've done it, and the insurance companies have pledged not to cancel their insurance. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the 22-23 work plan, but I think it's something that we can take advantage of here in Marin with the organization that we have. As we mentioned, we have a new clerk. Lori, thank you for being here. Really appreciate the support, especially since Lori came online about a week after we signed the contract with RGS, and we went at record speed for government to get this contract signed. And literally, I had a meeting with RGS and Lori like 2 days after the contract was signed, and then she jumped on board really quickly. So welcome, Lori. Thank you very much. Quick update on COVID. It just feels like everybody I know feels like they're dodging bullets when it comes to COVID. And so we've all but moved to completely virtual with the MWPA staff. A lot of it's for our own protection, but also that we've had interactions where we want to make sure that we don't have the opportunity to bring COVID to somebody else. So we've been working in the remote environment quite a bit. Our earned media strategy as part of our communication strategy is really starting to pick up some momentum. We had some great articles in the IJ lately. And I like that the home hardening article really was focusing on talking to residents rather than talking to some of the fire professionals. I really appreciated that. And then we had E&E News reach out to us and say that they wanted to include us in an article of theirs of 6 communities throughout the nation that they felt were doing the right thing when it comes to sustainability. And across the nation, they chose the MWPA as an example of a community that's doing a good thing for sustainability. If you go to the MWPA webpage and go up to the top and hit news, you'll be able to find the link to this article. Speaking of campaigning or media campaigns, Adapt to Wildfire campaign, and we intend to have a presentation about this next month's board meeting, but I wanted to give you a little preview. We're working with Fire Safe Marin on this campaign, but it'll be a fully Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority campaign. And it's really to help people to adapt to wildfire. And we are really, Chief Tyler said something great at the Operations Committee. He says, we've been doing a great job of preaching to the choir. And now it's time for us to get outside of the choir and start preaching to those that aren't in the choir. And Fire Safe Marin has been doing a lot of demographic research and identifying how we can start connecting with people that aren't in the choir. Now, this picture, this gentleman here probably already is in our choir. Maybe it's not the best example, but this is just a good example of some of the styles of imagery that we're going to use so that people can connect with the people that we're using. So our images will be across different demographics that are here present in Marin and pitch the program in a way that makes them want to join the effort to become adapted. The Fire Foundry, speaking of wanting to join, they had interviews for candidates back in December. They had, I think, upwards to 40, if not 50, very qualified candidates, and they had a hard time having to whittle them down. They have selected 12 candidates. They have 2 additional people to be part of the cohort and to act as mentors. Engineer from Marin County Fire Department has been selected as one of the supervisors, and Conservation Corps North Bay has recruited for the other supervisor. And we really look forward to seeing those crews or those folks start their education and start their training, and so they can start doing some work. And that's where MWPA's contribution comes into effect, is we are going to be providing the work for them. They will be bidding on projects with a very competitive rate. And our intent is to spread the Fire Foundry's work throughout all 5 of our geographical areas and all of our member agencies as much as we can. Ann's going to dig in this a little bit, but I think it's worth mentioning between the both of us. We are in work plan development season. And so we have really been setting up our processes that it will be much more efficient than last year so that we can have a great work plan going into 22-23. And our evacuation risk assessment, we had our interviews with the proponents on January 11th. We have some follow-up questions that the group is meeting, the interview group or our assessment group is meeting tomorrow so that we can really ask some in-depth clarifying questions to make sure that the scope of the proposal is exactly what we're looking for, and the timeline as well as the cost. So more to follow with that. Our intended timeline is that we'll have a preview of what we intend to bring at the executive meeting in February, so that we can bring the full proposal to the board in the February meeting. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Really fantastic. Lot going on here. So questions for our director from the board. Let's see, Barbara and then Julie, please.
Thank you, Mark. You mentioned the wildfire partners in Boulder. A few of us on the board, including myself, were part of the campaign for Measure C. And one of our kind of messages was by having MWPA in place, that would help protect against losing fire insurance and being able to get fire insurance. That was a really big selling point. So I'm wondering if maybe either a little subcommittee of the ops might be able to talk to the insurance commissioner about, I'm not sure if it's the same program as Boulder because I'm not familiar, but if we could maybe start those conversations to see what we can do. The insurance commissioner has been pretty active on trying to make sure people don't lose their insurance, and that there's no gouging. So just, I know, added to the plate of many things to do, but it seems like we're kind of beyond our infancy, and it might be good to start doing that kind of work if we can do it. Thank you so much for all the work.
Thanks, Barbara.
Great comments. And I'll just real quick add that that's actually going to be one of the projects for the 22-23 work plan, is developing that model. So and Bill Tyler really framed it well at the operations committee when they determined that strategy. And it's actually going to be one of our important components of our work plan.
So you will, Mark, what you're saying is that the operations team is on this, and she's suggesting ad hoc committee, but it sounds like they've already taken this on as a responsibility.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Barbara, really wonderful, and thanks for the background. So Julie and then Sashi, please.
Yeah, my comment is along the lines of Barbara's. I got noticed yesterday about a family in Ross whose insurance company just canceled their policy. This family is extremely upset. There's a lot of really good information on the Fire Safe Marin website about what to do when an insurance company cancels you. I referred them to that. Also, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal today, there's a huge article about AIG and other insurers who are going to cancel around 8,000 homeowners policies in California, possibly refer them to other insurance entities within the AIG family, but charge between 3 to 5 times the current amount that these people are paying. So this is going to become a huge, huge issue. And so, Mark, I'm really happy that the Ops Committee is going to be exploring some remedies, but we probably need to think even more creatively, but beyond the wildfire partnership, because this looks like it's going to be really ugly. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Mark, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. We need to be more, I mean, the Boulder program is just one of many of the examples that we're going to need to dig into, and perhaps we may need to be the example for others to follow.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Mark. Sashi, please.
Thank you. So on that, since this wasn't going to be my question, but since everybody's talking about the insurance and the insurance commissioner, there's a lot more to this picture than kind of the surface, and there are a lot of concurrent efforts going on here on the legislative side that I think will kind of become more clear over time, and I think Mark and the team are aware of some of those things, and I think that some of that will kind of percolate. I'm hearing everybody's concerns about people losing their insurance, and there's it's a little bit more of a complex picture than it appears on the surface. In addition, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety is launching a new homeowner certification program that would have some portion that you would self-attest to and some portion that you would get an inspection for, to have a little bit more teeth than the FireWise community was, which was more of a neighborhood organizing tool. The IBHS certification would have things like you have a Class A roof, you've dealt with your vents, you don't have 2 fences up against each other, and that your zone 0, your first 5 feet around your structure is managed, and there's some criteria associated with that. And I shared that with Mark kind of early on when I first was in touch with IBHS about it, and he and I both provided feedback to the program, and we're hoping that MWPA may be able to participate. There may be a way to use our inspections to substitute for their inspections in that program. And since it's the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, their members are this was crafted to be friendly to their members and to their to the customers of their members. So that's a really interesting development. I think that it will kind of end up getting populated out once it gets launched, which should be sometime soon. So there's.
Sashi, may I suggest, it sounds like you have a lot of information to add, and it's interesting as it is and relevant as it is, perhaps we should just make a commitment that those board members who have substantive information to share that you communicate directly with Mark Brown, and Mark can do that with the Operations Committee. I don't think that we need to have all those details at this point in time because it's product.
The only reason I shared it now is because it seemed to come up multiple times with multiple board members. So I'm just sharing that now. Board members can reach out to Mark for more details. I've been keeping him in the loop on that too. And then the question that I had, which was what I raised my hand for, was to Mark and Ann, in the last round of the work plan, there was a very deliberate strategy to kind of do these sort of low-hanging fruit projects that we knew were going to be exempt from CEQA, that would be high impact, and that would prioritize kind of house out. Is there a kind of a guiding theme for this year's work plan that you can share with us?
That'll be part of the Operations Committee report today.
Okay.
Thanks.
But yes, is the short answer.
Yeah, it is integral to the work that's in progress, Sashi. So thanks for asking. You'll hear about that a little bit later today. Other questions, comments for Executive Officer at this point from other board members? Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, board members, for the great comments and keeping us on point. Let's go to the public now for any comment. Lori, do we have any public comment?
I see no hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no more comments, let's bring it back to the board for any further discussion. No. Okay, thanks, Mark and all. Let's move on to the consent calendar. Item number 7, the opportunity for the public to comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent agenda with one action, or in the alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board member or staff member for separate discussion and vote. So do we have, does anyone like to pull an item from the consent calendar? No. Public comment? Oh, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you, President. I wanted to ask a clarifying question on item D, 7D.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and
I'll move the balance of the consent calendar.
yeah, so we have a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar.
Bruce, well, I'm sorry to interrupt. We'll need to take public comment before we go forward with the motion, if we may.
Okay. Lori, any public comment on the consent calendar?
Seeing no hands raised at this time.
No one? Okay, well, let's.
No one, yes.
No public comment?
No, I see no hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Rachel, did you make a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar?
I did.
I'll second Rachel's.
And we have a second?
Second by,
Mark White.
thank you.
Excellent. So Lori will need a,
Roll call vote.
yes, please.
Director Molesworth,
Yes.
Director McGinty, McGinty. Director Kurtz,
Aye.
Director Paulson.
Aye.
Director Rondani,
Aye.
Director Donahue,
Aye.
Director Evergettis.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. Director Shea,
Aye.
Director is it Jersky?
Jeske, aye.
Thank you. Director Goings,
Aye.
Director Finn,
Aye.
Director Hilliard. Hillard,
We have a new clerk.
You're muted, Catherine.
There she is.
Can't pronounce anyone.
I saw it.
yes, okay. Director White,
Aye.
Director Ravasoni, is that how you say it?
Ravazio, aye.
I don't know why I want to say it the other way.
You can just say Town of Corte Madera too, that's fine.
Okay. Director Kohler,
Yes, aye.
Director McMillan,
Aye.
and Director Burdo.
Aye.
Passes by unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you, board. Thank you, Lori. So let's see, Gabe it was item
7D.
7D, okay. We'll now consider, let's see, so Gabe, you have some concerns about this?
Yeah, just a brief comment. I mean, first I wanted to say I'm very supportive of Bill Keane, and I want to support Mark. My only concern is that as I read it, we're trying to get 370 hours of work, and it's just a very general scope, organizational development, legislational, government affairs, public stakeholder outreach. And I'm wondering, in light of the fact that we're starting to staff and make detailed job descriptions, if it might be possible now or in the future, if now is too soon, to put an addendum, which would outline the scope of work so that we can better track what the deliverables are.
Thanks, Gabe. That's an excellent comment. Mark?
Absolutely. But in fact, though, we see Bill's connection with the organization starting to decrease, and perhaps this be his last contract with us because of our developing our staff within the organization. He's been instrumental in helping write the grants that we've submitted. 2 grants that we have submitted are in the process of either submitting right now. So as we get the grant specialists, we start getting some of our other staff members within the MWP. I see his work going like this.
And just to clarify, I absolutely support you and what he does, Mark. I'm only looking for tracking so the board has a little better oversight.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So Gabe, a question, is this an item that you're suggesting we pull, or just as discussion, you're concerned about a clarification regarding specific duties, the deliverables, and you want to have a continuing discussion about that? Or
I don't want to stop the process. I realize how important it is to keep moving. So I just, am hoping, just wondering if there's an intention to add a scope of work or if that would be possible.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. And Mark, yes, the answer is yes.
Yes.
And perhaps you could provide that information to us in next month or in following meetings.
Absolutely. In fact, I believe, I'll double check after the meeting, but I actually believe the original had a scope of work that the original contract had a scope of work that unfortunately we didn't include that in the packet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Thank you, Mark. So seeing no other comment session, let's consider, I guess we need a motion to approve.
Public comment, Bruce, on.
Oh, yes, Dennis, thank you.
Yep, 7D.
I see no hands raised at this time.
No public comment. Okay, thank you, Dennis.
I'm pleased to move 7D.
Thank you.
Second.
Gabe Paulson, second. Thanks, Dennis and Gabe. And we need a roll call. On item 7. Go ahead.
Director Molesworth,
Aye.
Director McGinty,
Aye.
Director Kurtz,
Aye.
Director Paulson,
Aye.
Director Rodani,
Aye.
Director Donahue,
Aye.
Director Evergettis,
Aye.
Director Shea,
Aye.
Director Jersky,
Aye.
Director Goins,
Aye.
Director Hilliard,
Aye.
Director White,
Aye.
Court Madera,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director McMillan,
Aye.
Director Burdo.
Aye.
I think you skipped. I think you bypassed Director Finn.
I am so sorry. Director Finn,
Aye.
passes by unanimous. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, board. We're making progress, I can tell. Let's move on to item 8, staff reports, finance staff, treasurer Alicia Schiffman is going to provide the board with the staff report on this item. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Elisa Schiffman, the treasurer, for those of you who are new. And I'm just going to share my screen really quickly, just in case you're not following along. Everything's in writing in the report. I have nothing new to report, but well, except for this, we do now have an abatement program fund. And we didn't do this last year, but now this year we're subtracting out 2% of the agency payments, it is which one is it? The D space. So now we are subtracting out 2% of their payment and we are holding it in this abatement fund should the time arise when those funds are needed, and they will just be there if and when they're needed. And that's all I have new to report aside from what's written here. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alyssa. Questions, please.
Bruce, if I may, I can help provide some clarification on the abatement fund. That is so that we can follow the JPA language in the way that it was written. And it does stipulate that we put a 2% of the D-space monies towards an abatement fund. That was with the acknowledgement that abatement is an expensive process to follow and you have to have some money up front to be able to do it so that we can pay somebody to do the work. And then we levy their property taxes to be able to refund that account. The JPA language was quite vague in how it would get used, but the fact is that is with the member agencies that have the jurisdiction, and only the member agencies have the jurisdiction to do abatement on properties. So this can be a pool for those jurisdictions to be able to use. If the board or maybe operations suggests this later on that we can get more refined language on how to use that abatement program, or perhaps maybe even turn it into a volunteer abatement program, which Central Marin has been using to really great success. And that's identifying that one home in a community that is going to be the home that burns down the rest of the community. Perhaps we use that abatement fund for work on those properties. However, like I said, abatement is expensive, and currently we only have about $78,000 in there. So there's not a lot of work that can be done. So I think we allow that account to build while we refine the language on how we can use it.
Thanks, Mark, for the perspective. Very important. Mark and I had a discussion prior to this meeting just in this regard. So thanks. Rachel and then Catherine Hilliard, please.
Thank you. Just to follow on with the abatement fund, what is the 2% of?
Of the 20% D-space allotment.
And so it will, each year it will refresh, right? Or is it going to be ever accumulating?
Ever accumulating, because technically if we're doing, it depends on the policy that we adopt. If we go the traditional abatement route, well then through property taxes, it'll be the amount that we expend on abatements will be refreshed. And then we will continue to put 2% of the 20% into that fund.
So I think, maybe it's a conversation we bring back to the Finance Committee to talk about in terms of how large, at what point does it get an abatement fund is too big or not big enough?
Right.
And I don't know what the right answer is, but I think there should be some direction as you're talking about in terms of looking at some guidance around that.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you, Rachel. Excellent point. Catherine Hilliard, please.
Thank you. On that same point, I think there were several items in today's packet that I thought could have gone through the Finance Committee and reported out. But between the local mitigation projects, I saw something in the minutes that said that we are now starting to fund, it's either local mitigation core projects or D-space, that checks are already going out. Can you explain, Elisa or someone, which one of those of the three are being funded now?
Yes, the pass-through funds, the D-space and the local, those automatically go out right after we get the property tax disbursements from the county. So those are probably the ones that you're referring to. Those just went out in January to the member agencies.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine. Any other questions for Alyssa? I have just a quick question, which is looking at the 2% figure. Is it correct that we did not pull funds out of last year's budget and put them in reserve?
That is correct. We did not catch that stipulation until after we'd already passed through all the monies to the member agencies. So rather than asking for it back, we're starting with this fiscal year.
So I mean, you might, should we not just consider retroactively, it's not a lot of money, probably talking about $50,000. Consider pulling from last year's budget too. We do have a substantial reserve and it would be inconsequential really, but I mean, the letter of the agreement is the 2% per year. And I think we should look into retroactively funding that from last year's also.
Another option could be that, and you're right, we do have the rolling reserve and the reserve fund that we could pull from. But that would be pulling from core monies. The other option would be that this check that went out in January was 55% of the tax proceeds. In April, we sent out a 40%. We could take another 2% out. If the board wishes, we could take another 2% out, which would refund from last year, since essentially each of the member agencies were overpaid by 2% last year.
Okay. Well, I don't want to make things complicated. And let's not argue over pennies. I just forget what I just said.
It could be a great discussion with the Finance Committee.
Okay, thanks. And I see Rachel nodding her head and Catherine both. And yeah, those on the Finance Committee are nodding their heads also. Okay, let's move on. Any no comment? Let's see if there's public comment on this item, please. Lori?
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Please raise your hand. I see no hands raised at this time.
Thanks, Lori. Let's move on back to the board for any further discussion. And I am seeing none. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Alyssa, and thank you, board. Let's move on to item 8B, work plan progress update. We're looking forward to this. Planning Program Manager Ann Krelock is going to provide the board with a staff report on this item. So welcome, Ann.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So, the first thing I'd like to report is that we are continuing to work with our member agencies and our partners and our stakeholders to scope out and complete the environmental compliance associated with our core projects from the current 21-22 work plan. We have 16 CEQA documents completed out of approximately 26 core projects that need environmental compliance. Since our December board meeting, we've also held 2 additional environmental awareness trainings for crews who are implementing our MWPA funded vegetation management projects. And those include the North Lucas Valley Shaded Fuel Break Project and also the 2 evacuation route roadside veg management projects for Novato. And those projects appeared on the October board agenda. Additionally, we've worked really closely with the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership to reach a big milestone. We have a document ready to go to the Advisory Technical Committee for consideration. We'll be recommending to the ATC that they create an ad hoc subcommittee to really dig into the document in detail and then bring it to the full ATC in February or later for discussion. Regarding our resident grant programs, we're really excited to roll out this program to residents. We distributed a press release, suggested social media posts, application information to all of our member agencies. The Marin IJ ran a small story in their local news section on January 7th. The grant application webpage is getting a lot of traffic, even more than our homepage. And that's telling us that the links we have out there in social media are really working and bringing people to that page. So that's really exciting. We've received about a dozen applications so far, but we're expecting a lot more in the next several weeks. We've got about $500,000 available right now. Half of that is for defensible space work. The other half is for home hardening. And we have some other member agencies who have their own grant programs. And Fire Safe Marin actually has those grant programs listed on their site. And we have a link there on our site as well. Regarding the web portal, we are fine-tuning the web portal and we plan to invite a handful of member agencies to start beta testing it next week. As we've mentioned previously, the tool is really going to help provide a way for member agencies to upload projects and build the next work plan. So that's for fiscal years 22 and 23. The ATC is going to take a very active role in proposing projects and uploading to the tool. And the Operations Committee is helping set an overall strategy for the work plan, review proposals, and work through the budget. So this process creates then a database that will help link our projects to our board adopted goals and objectives, and in the future, our metrics, so that we can do a really great job of tracking our projects through the planning, the implementation, and then future maintenance cycles as well. Once those proposals are uploaded and ready for public viewing, the web portal is going to make it a lot easier for the public to see those proposals, see what's being proposed and where. And so we're really excited about that. And so, as you know, getting these projects, the vegetation management projects, through the environmental compliance process, that's a major hurdle. To date, we have about 280 miles of roadside evacuation route work, either underway or ready to go. 479 acres of vegetation management in shaded fuel breaks, goat grazing, etc., adjacent to communities, and about 12 miles of fire roads maintenance underway. And this photo is from North Lucas Valley, that shaded fuel break that was on the board agenda in October, and work has started on that project. Thanks, that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne. So much going on. So let's see. Any questions for Anne on this item from the board? Let's see. Catherine and Julie, please.
Hi, this is Catherine. Can you just answer these questions quickly? Okay, so what is the maximum amount that any individual homeowner can get as a grant?
For defensible space grants, it's up to $1,000 per parcel. For home hardening grants, it's $500 per parcel with a 50% match.
Okay, the next question was, is it reimbursed or is it upfront?
Those are reimbursed through the application process, and there are extensive instructions for that process. Residents can upload their receipts and photos of the work that got done, and that's all linked to the inspections that were done on their property. And so there are instructions on how to do that, but it's reimbursed and we need to see the receipts.
Okay, and the last one is, I don't know if you have experience yet, but approximately how long to process the request?
Ooh, we have kind of a target time frame for processing applications right now. I want to say it's a couple of weeks. Mark, do you remember what that is right now? It's pretty fast.
We're ensuring 30-day turnaround, but we have been at a week to 2 week turnaround.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Anne. Let's see, Julie McMillan, and then Sashi and Rachel and Barbara. Okay. Please. Yeah, Julie.
Thank you, Anne. You mentioned that the projects will be linked to the goals and objectives. And I think we talked at the executive committee meeting about also linking them to the CWPP. Is that something that you're planning on doing too?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. Through the process of uploading the information about your project, one of the questions is, does this support the CWPP and the list of projects that are identified and prioritized in that document? And so there's a space to call that out and describe that in detail.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Julie. Sashi, please.
And this is really great as usual. I'd love to get that slide with the metrics on it sent to all the board members so that we can pass it through to our boards and our councils and get that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Sashi. Rachel, please.
Thank you. In terms of the grant program, are we tracking socioeconomic and some data around the receipt of the grants? So
Absolutely. We're also tracking that through just about everything we're doing, whether it's D-space inspections and where our projects are going. We're putting that as an overlay of our data collection.
Mm-hmm.
So my other follow-up question is that I'm sort of curious about, I know that we're following some state other programs in terms of what is asked of, but providing tax information, providing I-9s. We're providing, we're asking the community, the resident, to provide a lot of personal information for $500. potentially, or up to $1,000, which we know if you've had to do work around your home is really not very much in terms of the big picture. And I'm wondering if there's thought around simplification. I mean, we sort of know more now as we're sort of getting into this and launching this, but we've seen with other programs like rental assistance and other programs that getting it into the right hands of what our goal is, sometimes we make it more cumbersome than it needs to be.
I can cover that one, Anna, if you don't mind. We really went back and forth with this decision on how for people to state their low income status. And what we've landed back to is what's in the tax ordinance language for our senior low income requirement. And so we followed that model because the way we looked at it is for the seniors to be exempt for about a $200 tax bill, they have to go through this process. And so if you're going to ask 500 to 1,000 or even more, it seems counterintuitive that we would have a lower requirement of proving that you're low income. So that's why we went the route that we went.
Rachel, thank you for really, thanks for the
I
question.
know.
I just have two things. One is on the defensible space, which is for low income AFN. It's possible that some of those folks won't really have the money to lay out. I'm wondering if we, maybe not this time, but maybe as we do this in the future, we look to a way for those folks who don't have the money to put out that we can somehow pay directly. And if it is possible to do something like that now, that would be good. The other piece I just wanted to share is one of the things we may want to do in the future. I don't know who's reviewing all these applications, but I'm guessing it's you and Ann and maybe some to be hired folks. Is we did a little small rental assistance program here, different subject, but sort of on the same deal. And we entered into agreements with Ritter and St. Denny's to actually, they vetted everybody, they did everything, and they didn't charge us anything. Now, I don't think they would do that for the home hardening, but really the defensible space, they're used to dealing with people that maybe have a little trouble with some of this stuff. So that may be something to look to in the future if there's possible partnerships there. They were really wonderful for us and very eager to work with us, and we didn't have a lot of money. Thank you.
697273. I'm not available.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Barbara, I think your points were understood and well taken. Mark, this is something to take into consideration here in future program design, correct?
Absolutely. Our goal is to, and we'll mention this in her report later on for the operations. We want to increase the scope and funding of our programs and model some successful programs. Santa Fe's got a great direct assistance program that Quinn designed that we want to look to follow.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? Let's move to the public for any comment on this item, please.
Is there any public wishing to speak to the directors, the board? I see no hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you all. Let's see, bring it back to the board for any further discussion. Great work. Great work all. Great work in progress. It's fantastic. So thank you. I think we have a wonderful product in the works there. Let's move on to action items. Let's see, number 9, draft MWP objectives. So Mark, you're going to provide a staff report on draft MWPA objectives.
Absolutely, and I'll do my best not to basically paraphrase the staff report, but I do want to hit some of the items and questions that were discussed during the executive committee and then from some questions from individual board members. I did notice an increase of activity for the executive committee video on YouTube, so I appreciate those that went and looked at that. I refreshed my memory this morning because unfortunately Charlotte is not able to be present today, and she's the one that knows it so much better than everybody else. She's really good at this, and so I'm going to do my best to channel Charlotte this afternoon through this process. And that's my way of really expressing my thanks for all the work that Charlotte did in leading this effort. She really did lead this effort. Ann and I were partners with her. The group that we had working with us was a great group. Chief Bill Tyler, Battalion Chief Todd Lando, Emergency Manager Quinn Gardner, Assistant City Manager Christina Lilovich, Fire Marshal Fred Hilliard, excuse me, Fire Captain Jordan Reeser, and some cameo appearances by our beloved Chief Weber. As discussed with Ann in the work plan development, I'm really excited about that we are connecting the work plan from the infancy of a project straight to objectives and in the future metrics, so that we know what we're aiming for from the very beginning. Just like Covey likes to say, begin with the end in mind. I know we are only talking about the objectives today, and we like to lead into measures of success, but we're still refining the measures of success because, quite frankly, it's hard to get that in this realm. But one of the things I did want to bring up is an emphasis that we are going to use acres. We are going to use miles of line created or shaded fuel break or miles of evacuation route clearing. But we're going to connect that to the risk that is associated to that acre, connect that to the risk that is associated to that mile of evacuation route, because an acre isn't an acre isn't an acre. Treating 10,000 acres of grass may be less impactful than treating 100 acres of conifer next to an important subdivision. So do know that we are going to connect to the risk of the area. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is connect to the risk assessment that is in the CWPP. And if the CWPP is only updated every 4 or 5 years, it'll be hard to see if we are getting traction on a year-to-year basis. So we're working with Fireside and with STI, who created the CWPP. Fireside, because they have our DSI data, to see if we can get more frequent updates to the risk assessment so that we have a better gauge of how we're doing year by year. The Operations Committee will also be looking at the goals and the objectives and using that as their tool to prioritize that mission. And perhaps one objective may be more important. For instance, since we are adopting a house out approach, objectives surrounding D space may get much more emphasis, as opposed to in goal 1, we have an objective that is connected straight to the pure wildland. So there'll likely be less of an emphasis. I think it's like objective 1.4 that deals with the wildlands. And has already been brought up, we will make sure that there is a great connection of the to the CWPP and Appendix B and the projects that are listed in there. Fire agencies did a great job of listing those projects. As I kind of discussed a little bit, there is a difference between goal 1 and goal 5. Goal 1 is about vegetation management. The first part of goal 1 and the objectives is for the properties that are in and around private properties. And so that takes us into the coffee park scenario, that it's not in the WUI, but there's still work that needs to get done. Then we also have objectives that are the first couple hundred feet away from homes, an objective for what is traditionally considered the wildland urban interface, and an objective for the pure wildlands. Whereas goal 5 is really focused on the private properties. And that's where the MWPA supports our residents by letting them know what they should do, and then giving them tools like chipper days or grants or other opportunities to give them the tools to get the work done on their properties. And so we also try to avoid crossing that line of putting projects within the objectives and keeping the objectives at a higher elevation that drive the projects that would be in the work plan. And then thank you to Director Kohler because pointing out that access and functional needs definition is kind of not a well-known definition. So through this work, we will make sure that that what the definition that we're using for access and functional needs is what is the definition that California Office of Emergency Services uses. We felt that was a good template for us to use, but we'll put that definition when we list those objectives into the website. And thank you, Barbara, for some of the typos that you caught as well. After reading it so many times, you think we'd see them, but you know how it is when you read something over and over. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see, Barbara, please.
Thank you so much. I think the context is helpful in looking at these objectives and the goals without the context, and maybe some of the language that sets it up wasn't really clear to me. Now, I did provide some comments beforehand, and Charlotte sent some responses, which I've reviewed, and I don't feel comfortable with some of those responses. And unfortunately, I had a council meeting. I didn't have time to try to go back with her and actually talk to her. So I'm just going to go over a few of my comments, and they're short and sweet, but there's maybe about 5. So I'll do it quickly. So on objective 1.2, I was hoping that we could remove maintain appropriate vegetation management and take in the wildlands out, because I don't think it should be constrained just to the WUI. And Charlotte said something about this is only for properties that are not private properties, and I sort of get that, but it just seems to me that that would be a good thing, just to be clear that we're all about vegetation management and not just stuck with the WUI. So take that under consideration. Maybe you guys can talk more to her about that. And then under goal 2, objective 2.5, when it talks about supporting partnerships with fire law, whatever, is maybe we could have some kind of a workbook or a template, because that will also save us time, all this back and forth. So I know I didn't really understand her response to that. Under objective 2.7, when we're talking about the AFN residents, and she thought this was a good change, that we would say provide resources and best practices for, in parentheses, and to identify locations of, and then AFN residents, because it's great to say that we're going to do this, but we need to know where they are, and that's big. So she liked that. Under objective 2.9, I had asked that we add this new objective, which is develop fire clear maps. Charlotte's response that was sort of up to the locals. When I worked with Todd Lando and Mike St. John on this for Fairfax at the time, this was when MWPA was being created, Todd and Chief Tyler did them for Novato, and Todd coordinated. Todd assured me, as did I believe Jason Weber, that the plan was that fire clear maps would be done for all of MWPA, and those are community-friendly evacuation maps. So she felt that was more a separate project, but that was kind of at least Todd's plan, that we would do those for everybody. So take that under consideration. And then under objective 4.2, I had asked if we could add fire adapted, or whatever the words you guys use, landscaping to that. Objective 5.2, I thought we could add goats and sheep to that objective, not just limited to what it was. And then under objective 1.2 on the next measures, again, I'd like to see if we could take out in the wildlands. And then I know I'm going fast, I'm hoping, but you already have these. Objective 2.2, RR12, if I'm correct about the fire clear maps, I would add the QR codes for those. And then again, under objective 2.7, identify locations of AFN residents. And I just want to say, I think you guys have done a great job. The work group has done a great job. These are just some tweaks that I would make. And if you guys can talk about them a little more, maybe, sometimes when we're so close to it, we understand it, but it's not as clear to people on the outside. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, and Bruce, if you don't mind, I think I can go point by point fairly
Yeah,
quickly.
please, I would like you to do that, Mark. I know that Barbara provided this comment to you in writing that you two have already communicated and you already have some responses to those. So let's just.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as taking the word wildlands out of objective 1.2, that is what the purpose of objective 1.1 is, the area that's not in the true wildlands. So again, it's objective 1.1 is more focused on the built environment. And then 1.2 is that piece from the built environment outside. So we feel like we have that portion already covered.
Okay, I see that. Thank you. That was a better explanation than what I heard. Great.
Sometimes,
okay.
Yeah. For detection, alert, and evacuation, and about the fire clear maps, I love the fire clear maps, but I think I agree that with Charlotte that starts getting into the realm of a specific project rather than an objectives, whereas objective 2.4 says provide resources and best practices to facilitate residents evacuation planning. We feel that the development of fire clear maps really falls within that.
Okay, so
and
you think
then
that's more of a detail.
and I'm trying to make sure
Okay, I got it. Thank you. I mean, I don't necessarily agree, but okay, great. Thank you.
And then objective 4.2 is literally stating is supporting a goal. And so we're taking the title of the goal of created by the board. So in order to change the objective, we would have to change the goal. And and you're completely right. Fire smart landscaping is so important for us to emphasize, but we're doing that within the D-space portion of that goal. So I hope we have that covered.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I think I got most of your items.
Okay, the one about the goats and sheep.
Oh, the goats and sheep, that's within the D-space realm. And so that is for the property owners to be doing defensible space work. So we really don't have the ability to dictate to people to use goats and sheeps in their D-space, their personal D-space on their private property.
So just quickly, I'm sorry to take everyone's time, but goal 5 is just for private people. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, well that's context. Just looking at these, I didn't get that. Okay, thank you. And then, all right, so I think we got it all. And thank you so much, everyone, for your patience.
One item was the fire adapted description of landscaping. Mark, did you address that?
Yeah, fire smart landscaping. We feel that's built within the goal 5 of D-space. Perhaps in the future, if we look to reevaluate our goals, that we modify that goal to put a stronger emphasis in fire smart landscaping.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, thanks, Barbara. Sashi, please, and then Rachel.
Thank you. So I'm just going to reiterate some of the comments I made at the executive committee, just so it's out here, but at a high level, the goals as stated here and the objectives, I know Charlotte is still working on them and just kind of wanted some input here. But we talked about what the lanes are, what is the role of the MWPA in fulfilling those goals, and what's the role of the member agencies. Some of that's kind of listed in there. But it'd be great to, as we communicate that, to make that a little bit more clear. And yeah, just reiterating that the goal as stated there these are goals that were approved by us, but they sort of cover things that are not just what we are going to do. It's sort of what the whole community together, from MWPA to member agencies to individuals and other organizations are going to do. So as we communicate this, it'd be great to be more clear about what those lanes of responsibility are.
Thank you. Thank you, Sashi. Rachel, please.
Great, thank you. I know we've been talking about the goals and objectives for a while, but I looked at it with a different lens this time, and maybe we're in a different place, or I'm in a different place in terms of reading it. Grants to me doesn't read as a goal. I liked the term that's used by San Rafael and by Mark, you had mentioned it today, direct assistance. Because when we talk about grants, depending on who you're talking to, you might be thinking we're going out to, filling out a grant request. And I think what we're talking, the goal here is provide direct assistance. And underneath the direct assistance, there's different types of tools that we would use. One of them being potentially individual support for individuals. So this might be a future agenda item that we need to look at in terms of rewording this. But I think the challenge for me is the objectives for the grants is just we're using grants to reach other goals. So therefore, grants is not a goal. Grants is a tool. And I'd say the same thing with public education. The goal around public education is, in the very simplest way, would be, are people informed? Right. And then there's ways of getting to people, tools of how to get people informed. So we use public education to reach other goals, which to me is the test of, is it a goal or is it a tool? And so I think both goal 3 and I think it's 4, public education, are not really goals. Unless we phrase them differently to have different types of public education. We're going to improve social media, or we're going to do direct mail, or those type of goals around that. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. And I apologize, it's probably about 4 months late bringing this up, but it's now, I think we're going to look back at this and say, why did we make grants a goal, and why did we have public education as a goal? We're using those things to reach our other goals.
Mark, do you want to respond to that?
I do, and the term living document is sometimes an overused term, but I really believe that our strategic plan needs to be considered a living document, and we can't be afraid to update our goals. And based on the way that the context that you're giving, I tend to agree that the goals of grants and public education is a means to an end. So perhaps we do need to reevaluate.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So this is a living document that we can reevaluate, Rachel, in next iteration. Steve, please.
Yeah, point well taken with the grants. I think, just in the nomenclature, you could call it something different, like direct assistance, or even say grant making, whatever it may be. I would really disagree that and state that public education and outreach is absolutely a goal. And it's typically something that public agencies, whether you're a city, a county, statewide, don't do very well. And that was something that I really advocated for when we were first putting this together, to say, hey, we need to have the goal of education and outreach, because we're an ancillary agency, right? We're not a city council. We're not the board of supervisors. We're something that, if the issue of wildfire wasn't really at the front of everybody's minds, we would really have to do a much bigger job than we're already doing to get our word out, to think about the policies from your local sewer districts, right? Like, you don't really know that much about them, because it's not something we think about until something goes wrong. And so I think, and I'll say, within our work plan, the items and the goals that were dedicated to public outreach, going back to my first conversation with Mark, I think we've done a pretty damn good job of executing in the area of public outreach and education. And I would not, be in favor of seeing that slip away from one of our top line goals. I think that's very important. I think especially when you think about the things we do, like we need to get the word out about chipper days. We need to get the word out about, we saw very early on, a lot of people didn't know about the senior exemption. That's where communication and public outreach make a huge, huge difference. And we need to keep that as a top line goal. So I'll just add.
Thank you, Steve. Mark, do you want to respond, or should we move on to other comments?
It's so easy to argue on either sides of the topic, and I think it is a good discussion for in the future. I mean months in the future. I think let's live with these objectives and see how they turn out, and then have the discussion of how we tweak our goals whether to refine the public education or remove the public. I mean, I think that is a topic for the future as we learn more about ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Well spoken. Any other questions or comments from the board? No, let's move out to public comment on this item, please.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Please raise your hand now. I see no hands raised.
Okay, thanks. Back to the board for any discussion and a motion, please. Rachel.
Sorry, I'm just going to follow up on Steve's comment and totally agree. Education and public outreach and education is hugely important. Then the objectives then need to be better defined of what we mean by that. What are we actually trying to achieve? Because right now the objectives are just written as how to use it to reach the other goals. I think if we're going to improve what we're doing in communication and education, we need to have objectives specifically to that point.
Thanks, Rachel. Barbara, please.
Just a quick follow-up on, I fully support what Steve Burdo said, but also on the grants issue, while I understand what Rachel is trying to say, just remember that was in the ballot measure and that was in the JPA agreement but it definitely was in the ballot measure. So even though there are inelegant ways and it's not exactly the way you would say it to meet grammar or whatever is perfect, we have to, when we do revisit these things, we have to think about what was in the ballot measure, what do we promise? And thanks. Great work, everyone who worked on this. I know a number of you have. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for that. Any other directors, any discussion? I am looking for a motion here, please.
So moved.
Steve Burdo, motion, second.
I would second. Can I just add a friendly amendment with one change?
I'm sorry, Barbara.
I would add a friendly amendment, which is to say identify and locate AFN, just that change in those two areas.
As the author of the motion, I will accept the friendly amendment.
Thank you.
I think I have that authority.
Yeah, Mark, we're going to capture that. We've captured.
I have that captured.
Yes, thank you. So the second, please.
I second.
Rachel. So motion by Steve, modified by Barbara, accepted by Steve. Back to Rachel for a second. Lori, we need a vote.
Director Molesworth,
Aye. Aye.
Director McEntee,
Aye.
Director Kurtz,
Aye.
Director Polson.
He had to step out.
Okay, thank you. Director Radani,
Aye.
Director Donahue, Director Donahue,
Catherine?
she's on.
Catherine, you're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Evergettis,
Aye.
Director Shea,
Aye.
Director Jersky,
Aye.
Director Goins,
Aye.
Director Finn,
Aye.
Director Hilliard,
Aye.
Director White,
Aye.
Director from Corte Madera,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director McMillan,
Aye.
and Director Burdo.
Aye, and fantastic work, everybody.
Thank you.
Here. Thanks, everybody. And Mark, our thanks to the ops and the ATC and all your and Ann's work on this. Let's move on to item B, which is Administrative Analyst Grant Specialist. This is regarding proposed position descriptions and salary ranges. Mark, staff report, please.
And again, I'm gonna start off by mentioning how quickly RGS was able to come on board and meet with us in the first or second week of January and be able to have a position description and salary survey ready to go by Friday of last week. I would say in government speed, that is beyond warp speed. So my big thanks to Patty Howard from RGS. We did have a draft position description to share with her. we're able to point her towards a few agencies that we thought had similar missions and or similar needs for these types of positions. And those agencies are listed in the salary survey that's included in your packet. But we thought it was a good broad example of agencies within the North Bay. I do want to briefly describe some of the nuances maybe that the position description doesn't get into. One of the roles will be for board clerk and records management. I think we've been doing a good job with records management. I know we could do a better job. And that's because we just simply haven't had the time to really make sure that our records management is exactly where it could be. And then we're looking for a person that can manage our contractor list, that when we go out and put our request for rates from our contractors for light type of projects, and we can have that vendor list. This is the position that Ann or our vegetation management specialist or our vegetation management specialist working for other agencies can reach out to, say, hey, I need this vendor for this contract. And that person will be saying, okay, vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, here you go. And then there'll be a handoff there. And then the invoicing comes into that person, and they would make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed in the invoice, and then we can process the payment. Another one is day-to-day communications with the public. And I was wondering if we can continue with our relationship with our RGS for this overall position. But when it comes to the vendor list and it comes to our day-to-day communications, we really need somebody that has intimate knowledge of the MWPA, that can really speak to the public well, or point them to the people within the MWPA member agencies that can answer their question the best. And then we have our HR duties that we know that we are lacking in, whether it's onboarding personnel, making sure that they have all their legislatively required training, so on and so forth. And then quite honestly, administrative assistant duties. We went back and forth whether we needed to call this a management analyst or administrative analyst. We landed on administrative analyst simply because we know that this type of position is going to be a jack of all trades. And we're not likely to find the person who is at the high end of the journey level, advanced journey level for all of these positions. So we're probably going to find someone who's advanced in some of the positions or duties that we have, and we're going to bring them up to speed in the other one. So that's why we stuck with administrative analyst. I think you saw that we were aiming for the median of our comparables. And then we also included our benefit package with the 701A, medical, what we would put towards medical. And it comes to a 30% benefit roll-up, which really is low in the government world. And that 36% is inclusive of their time off. We are looking to make this position an at-will position, and we can negotiate the length of term with any prospective employees. After approval, we'll start the recruitment process right away. So that's the administrative analyst. Moving on to the grant specialist. We wanted to be clear that this was not a position description, because it is not a position that will be an MWPA employee. It will be someone that we're looking to contract. So that's why we called this guidelines to guide us what type of contractor and what type of work this individual would be doing. With approval, we can go out and start recruiting for these types of contractors, and that's when we can start negotiating the rate based on qualifications and their scope of work. As mentioned in the staff report, though, I think the grants position is going to kind of have an ebb and flow based on how successful we are getting grants during grant writing season, which we're in now. There'll be a little increase in work, and then after we launch the work that the grant will be funding, then there's going to be a ton of administrative work to make sure all our I's or T's are crossed and dotted. And then that person will also be the person that handles the grant applications that we're getting from our community grant program right now. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see. Let's start with Steve, please. Steve Berto.
Yeah. Want to hear more about how we landed on the salary range for the administrative analyst position. I don't think that it's totally out of balance with what we're looking for, but I think to call it an administrative analyst is wrong. Like when I look at as you all know, I work for Contra Costa County, and when I look at our salary scales, right, and when I look at the position descriptions, it seems like what we're looking for is an administrative services officer or administrative analyst, like 2 or probably 3 at that point, because you go administrative analyst 1, 2, 3. The administrative analyst for Contra Costa County gets at the high end of the salary scale is about $70,000 a year. For the administrative services officer, which is the highest level of that class and is the finance director for either the department or the county as a whole, that's about $124,000 a year at the high end. So I'm wondering kind of, I saw in the staff report what other agencies we were comparing it to, but I don't feel that that was comprehensive. And I think, you know, we either need to call the position what it is, and this isn't an analyst position. Administrative analyst indicates you're coming in at the low end of the scale, and at this salary range, I can't see how that's that. I think what we're looking for here is an administrative services officer, or if not, if we're looking for entry level, second class, you know, administrative analysts, we may want to think about lowering the ticket price there.
And if I may, Bruce, to address, we definitely aren't looking for an entry level individual, and administrative analysts for most of the entities that we looked, they considered the administrative analyst 2 position, and that's really where what we targeted was administrative analyst 2 as a journey level position, whereas administrative analyst 3 or the ASO were more of the well-experienced journey position, or the advanced journey position. So that's how we landed with, like I said, we were back and forth. When we even did discuss administrative services officer, but when we look at the salary surveys for the county of Marin, within the county of Marin, we had administrative analyst 2 for the county of Marin is at $9,000 a month. County of Sonoma is $8,800 a month. And then City of Petaluma is $8,300 a month. Whereas, you know, some of the other positions that didn't quite have the same title were actually quite more than what we are proposing.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thanks, Steve, for your comments, and Mark for your response. Catherine, please.
Yeah, I would just like to support Mark in this case. 105,000 approximately is what we're saying, but fully loaded, it's about 144,000 with all the benefits. And for the quality and the level of person that we want to attract, and it's not a single agency, it's 17 agencies, and it's a variety of tasks that are not quite comparable, but you know, I think this is a person that we want to really do an excellent job. And in order to get that type of person in today's market, I think we have to offer the what's being proposed. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Other board members? No, Steve. Well, let's hear from Julie, please, and then Steve.
Yeah, I support this too. Mark, can you just explain the administrative cap and where this falls in that cap?
Absolutely. And I'll do for both positions. For the administrative analyst, it lands fully in our administrative budget. And we've done the analysis and the math on that, and we have the space for that within the administrative budget currently. The grant specialist, we look to be funding that through the grants program itself, or as fees built into any grants that we request. And we feel that this position is outside of the administrative role, and we would be fully funded through that.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Let's see, Steve, where?
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Steve. Barbara Kohler, please.
Yeah, just a quick one. I think the title administrative analyst to me sounds like a low-end position. When I look at the duty statement, or what I would call a duty statement, I think we're looking for somebody who's a clerk as well as many higher end responsibilities. And so I think our title, I'm not sure the services officer is the right thing when Steve said that's their finance director, because we're not looking for somebody at that level. But I'm just wondering if we at least called it a 2 or something, because to me, an administrative analyst can often be someone who is doing a lot of secretarial duties. And I think the job description really lays out much better. You know, you have to read that to really get what this is about. I don't think we're representing 17 different agencies going to this person. So I don't think that necessarily, but I do feel that you lay out quite an extensive workload that requires some higher level skills. So I'm supportive of the pay, although I might go for it. But I'm just kidding. But I think we might want to look at capturing what we're doing with a little bit of a better title or something, so that it's more clear what we're doing for people looking at the outside saying, remember, everybody wanted us to be lean and mean and not hire people. And so we're doing that. And that makes sense. But let's really capture the title so that people know we're not hiring a secretary or an office assistant for 105,000. And so I don't have a good suggestion, but when I read that job description, and I had talked to Steve about this before because it seemed really high when I just looked at the title. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't have a good suggestion here.
Thanks,
but
Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. I think you made your point fairly clear.
I made my point.
Yeah,
I have two suggestions what we could do.
yeah. So Barbara, appreciate it. And Mark, you're going to take this under advisement.
Well, and I think it could be made part of the board motion if you like. We really targeted administrative analysts too. So perhaps we add the two at the end of it. And the other one is, like I said, we were really teetering back and forth between administrative analyst name and management analyst name. And perhaps the management analyst can really give a better sense to our people. And so perhaps the motion is we change the name to management analyst.
Thanks, Barbara, and thank you, Mark. I think that's good resolution. Any other board members wish to make comments here, comments or questions? No. Let's move on to the public, please, for any comments.
Are there any publics at this time that would like to speak on this item? Please raise your hand. Seeing none at this time.
Okay, let's come back to the board for discussion and motion. I think what we have is consensus. So I think we're looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion to go forward with the name change of what we are currently calling administrative analyst to management analyst, but approve the position description as well as the salary level. And are you also looking for approval of the guidelines for the contract person, the grants person? And so I would add that to it.
Second. Oh,
Okay, Barbara Kohler motion and Julie second. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see, where do we have Lori? Looking for you.
Yeah. Director Molesworth,
Aye.
Director McGinty.
Aye.
Director Kurtz,
Aye.
Director Polson. Please step out.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Rodano, I'm sorry, Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Donahue,
Nay.
Director Evergettis,
Aye.
Director Shea,
Aye.
Director Jersky,
Aye.
Director Goins,
Aye.
Director Finn,
Aye.
Director Hilliard,
aye.
Director White,
Aye.
Director of Corte Madera,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Director McMillan,
Aye.
Director Burdo.
Aye.
Passes by 16-1.
Thank you all. Really great, Mark. And
I'm sorry,
we're on a move.
15-1.
15-1. Okay, let's
Yeah.
move on to committee reports. We're going to receive reports from Fire Safe Marin, Ops, and Advisory Technical Committee. And we're going to start with a report from Stephen Peters. Steve, before you start, I just want to make a very quick comment that this annual report that you've produced is bright and clear. It's professional. It's informative. I just want to commend you on the quality of this report. And the public's going to look at this and say, "Oh my goodness." So anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I want to commend you. And please, my personal commendations to the team. I know that you're here, but there's a whole team behind you. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So thanks, Stephen.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that, and I'll be sure to pass that along. Well, with that, I just want to share a few of the highlights of the report. These slides are taken directly out of the Greater Report, which, like Director Goins said, is available on Fire Safe Run's website. So to begin, a quick recap, we finished off the season. We removed over 14,000 cubic yards of flammable material from residential homes. As you can see on the left of the right of your screen, we have a great spread through all the communities in the county. This was completed in over 3,700 pickups, which is a 40% increase from the previous year. And furthermore, we reduced per stop costs as well as increased participation. So going into the participation, sorry, one moment, there it goes. Sorry about that technical difficulty. There we go. So we saw not only a 40% increase overall in resident participation, but 80% of the residents that participated in our program were first-time users. So we're really proud of that. Not only in communities that we had served in 2020, but we also expanded more into West Marin. So we included Bolinas and Inverness this year. We did do limited numbers of events in the 2020 season, but we've further extended the service to fully include them, which is something we're very happy about. In terms of the money spent, I want to note before I say anything more that the money we expended was done over 2 fiscal budgets as opposed to just one. So that's something to keep in mind. The program came in under budget. We're really happy about that. We spent just about $890,000. The vast majority of that was on operational costs. In fact, 90 cents out of every dollar went directly into our core mission, which is obviously removing, chipping, and disposing of hazardous flammable material. In addition, we had about $61,000 of administration costs and additional costs in marketing and technology and whatnot. But we're really happy with what that money got us. We had, sorry guys, my computer appears to be a bit slow. So we had residents take a voluntary survey after the chipping had taken place at their property, and we had a great return on that. Over half of the residents that we serviced participated in the survey, and of those participated, they rated our service and the experience they had with our program from registration all the way to the date of removal a 5 out of 5 stars, and that's again 98.7% of them. In addition to the numerical data, we also got numerous testimonials, some of which are on the screen right here, just saying how much the program was appreciated, how much people were excited to participate in it. And in fact, our data shows that over 87% of Marin residents who utilized the program listed it as the motivating factor to get out and physically do wildfire risk reduction on their own properties. Looking forward to 2022. We're just going to do this. We have a few goals. Mainly, we want to extend our service to make sure there are no more holes in the county. So anyone who lives within the JPA, we want to make sure that they get access to both pickup days through the 2022 season. It didn't happen a lot that we had gaps in our maps, but we want to continue to work to make sure there are as close to 0 gaps as possible. We're also in the final stages of preparing to release our 2022 schedule. We're doing that quite a bit earlier than we did last year in the hopes that we can get better coordination with local community organizations as well as member agencies and DSI departments to be able to coordinate with them and increase participation. And additionally, we're looking to make changes on our website and with our digital marketing and to ensure that there's more notifications to residents so that we can drop our no pile pickups, which is when our trucks pull up to a house and there's no pile left out for one reason or another. We want to reduce that from what we found to be about 20% this year, all the way down to closer to 10%. Like I said, all of these slides are in the complete reports, and that's available on Fire Safe Marin's Chipper page online, and it's available for download as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Fantastic. If you'll drop the screen share, please. Directors, let's go take real quick questions then, Julie.
Yeah, this is a great report, and I'm just wondering how we can better get the word out so we're not just preaching to the choir, as Bill Tyler says.
That's a great question. We are in the process of developing some sort of one-page material for both fire agencies and town managers, as well as board members if they want them. We're doing that so we have a more standardized thing we can send out to residents, and that way we don't have any outdated information or misinformation going out, which is something we encountered here and there last year. Those will be out within the next month and a half, and you can all get copies of them if you would like.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Stephen. Other board members, questions? I have a question that I've asked previously, and this might be more for Mark, but knowing that we have another 8 years ahead of us, and that we're going to be doing this every year, I'm just questioning, do we have the ability to engage in long-term contracts with inflation adjustments to keep contractors here, number one, for familiarity and certainty, and might be some price benefits. And so that's just a question, Mark, that I think that I'd like you to consider. And as you look at administration, I think that it could be a cost savings item for us and provide us with some consistency. So I just want to put that back on the table for thought and consideration.
Absolutely.
I don't think we need to respond.
Okay.
Okay. Directors, other comments? Julie, your hand is still up.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up. I'm wondering if maybe it would be a good opportunity for someone to do a Marin voice piece, just showcasing all this excellent work and have it in one place, kind of a check-in.
Timing would be key on that too. Do it the right time.
Thank you, Julie. There is some talent on this team in that regard. Yes, Rachel, please.
Oops, sorry. Just a quick question, and maybe for next month, can you provide a little bit of update on Firewise communities and neighborhoods and what's happening in that space, and if there's still as much focus on doing that, or is that sort of going away?
We still do work closely with them. We are, now that we're transferring the program over more towards the MWPA, it's not going to be as hand in hand as it was. If you'd like a better update on that, I'm happy to provide you one, but I'll have to check back in with our Firewise liaison.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Thanks, Rachel. Other directors, please. Really well done, Stephen and team. Mark, let's move on to the operations item 10B.
And that'll be Ann.
Ann.
Sure. Hi. So Chief Tyler wasn't able to join us. Neither was Dan Schwartz, who's the vice chair. So I'll be giving the report today. The Operations Committee met on January 13th and held an election for chair and vice chair for the 2022 calendar year. Chief Tyler with Nevada Fire decided to step down, and Chief White with San Rafael Fire decided to step up. So I'd like to extend a big thank you to Chief Tyler for all of his time and hard work over the past year as ops chair, and we really look forward to working with Chief White. Dan Schwartz is staying on as vice chair, so a huge thank you to him for his past work and for hanging in there for another year. We're looking forward to continuing our work with him. The Ops Committee held a discussion around the creation of a veg management specialist position that the NWPA staff proposed through the board's strategic ad hoc subcommittee process. There are 2 veg management specialists currently proposed. As you know, one would manage the chipper program and the other would support planning and implementation of other veg management projects. That second position was really the subject of that discussion at the Ops Committee and also within some ad hoc subcommittee meetings of the Operations Committee. So some of the discussion points included exploring which member agencies already have MWPA funded veg management positions and what their workloads are, meeting with representatives from each of the geographic zones to hear about workflow, workload, current and future needs associated with carrying out MWPA funded work, and starting to explore how the costs associated with that position might be spread among member agencies. And some of the initial results of those conversations included just a strong support for adding staff. The group felt that we may even need more than just the 2 positions that are currently proposed. The Ops Committee would like to continue discussing which member agencies those veg management specialists would support. And in addition to MWPA's veg management specialists, whether it makes sense to add additional veg management folks that would work directly for member agencies or the MWPA. The Ops Committee is going to continue discussing, which member agencies that position would support and how best to fund the position or positions. And the results will probably be some kind of blended approach. In addition, at that meeting, the Operations Committee determine an overall strategy for the next work plan. So that's a topic that came up earlier today. So yes, January 13th, the Ops Committee discussed that. And that overall strategy is kind of one of their first to-dos each January, and that will guide development of the next fiscal year's work plan. And that approach really continues that house out strategy that we've been using so successfully so far, but also increasing the grant programs, funding, variety, really exploring that, using data to help provide, to figure out which kinds of grants are needed and what might be most beneficial. Increasing shaded fuel breaks adjacent to communities, and we'd really like to explore whether or not MWPA could coordinate a CAL FIRE grant application for shaded fuel breaks adjacent to communities, maybe in one or several zones. Partnering with insurance, so IBHS, Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, to help avoid insurance cancellations, so really diving in on that. And then the public education piece, really increasing public education and expanding that work beyond the audiences that we've already reached, and how do we preach outside of the choir? So that's it for me. It was a busy meeting, as you can tell.
Thanks. Thank you, Ann. Directors, and we'll take public comment at the end of the 3 reports. Any questions or comments for Ann? So much work being done. Thank you, Ann. Let's move on to the ATC Committee. Mark, is that you or Ann?
Ann again.
Okay, Ann, you're on.
The ATC Committee didn't meet in between our last board meeting and this one. The next meeting will be January 31st, and then we'll be able to provide additional updates from that committee.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Is there any public comment on the committee reports, please, Lori?
Anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time, please raise your hand. I see no hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Ann, and all. Let's, and any final thoughts?
I'll just add one. If you have extra time on your hands, and I know you always do, and I can get you the timestamp, but listening to the way Bill Tyler described some of his vision for the strategy, I think it's worthwhile. And I'll get you the time where it started, but I think hearing it from Bill and the way he put it really resonated with me.
Nice.
Yeah, you're here, Mark. I listened in on that also. It's worth a listen. Okay, thanks. Let's move on to informational items. Item 11, in addition to the items listed on the agenda, does staff have any information items for the board? We have A through E, which are essentially minutes, and F is the MWPA secret compliance strategy. Looks like we are ready to move on then to for planning program manager Ann Freelock again, and special counsel Sabrina Teller. And I think we have Sabrina on. Yes, we do. We're going to get an educational session regarding MWPA's CEQA compliance strategy. And this is a follow-up to some of the threads, the types of questions that we received regarding our environmental compliance work. And Anne and Grace and Sabrina, thank you very much. I think you got a fairly short presentation on education. So thanks, please. Let's go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll kick it off and then I'll hand it over to Sabrina and then Grace, and then we'll try to keep it pretty high level and fairly brief. So, even under the most routine of circumstances, environmental compliance can be a pretty complex topic. In the case of the MWPA, a brand new model for carrying out fire risk reduction at the county scale, it's even more complex. So I wanted to start an occasional agenda item that addresses some of our frequently asked questions from board members, member agencies, our partners, or the public. And so today we're going to take kind of our top three topics that come up quite frequently. First, what a lead agency and a responsible agency does under CEQA, and MWPA's role, particularly as a responsible agency. Second, what is substantial evidence and why do we prepare such detailed memos for all of our projects? Third, what are desktop reviews for biological resources and how do they inform our CEQA process? So that's what we're going to cover today, and Sabrina is going to take the next slide.
All right, thank you, Anne. You're going to be responsible for advancing the slides. Great. Okay. So we have had a lot of questions, as Anne said, about the nature of MWPA's role when it's acting as a responsible agency, which is, I think, its most common role, given that it is a source of funding to all of its member agencies for a lot of the core projects, and provides also some technical assistance on other agency projects. So just wanted to briefly review with you sort of what the distinction is between a lead and responsible agency. I think most people are familiar with the concept of the lead agency being the agency that has the primary responsibility for carrying out a project and is therefore most responsible for complying with CEQA. But here, given the extent of the role that MWPA plays, you have a sort of a larger role as a responsible agency than is typical maybe for other types of projects. So a responsible agency is one that has some permitting or funding or approval authority over a project, but it is usually not the agency actually carrying out the work, or it isn't the agency with the primary responsibility for designing and implementing the project. So here, when MWPA is acting as kind of an advisory agency, or in its role as providing the funding, it is clearly a responsible agency under CEQA. And the thing that I want to stress is that even though a lead agency is typically the one with the primary responsibility for implementing CEQA, when you're acting as a responsible agency, you still have an independent obligation to comply with CEQA with respect to the level of discretion and extent of authority that you have in that role. And so some of the highlights that are important for MWPA to understand in its role as a responsible agency is that you have to consider, if the lead agency has prepared its own environmental documentation, you as the responsible agency have to independently review and assess the adequacy of that environmental documentation, and whether you agree with all those conclusions and whether you agree that they are supported adequately by substantial evidence. And if you conclude that there are some gaps that need to be filled, or if you don't agree in certain respects, or just would feel more comfortable with additional documentation or research, then you as the responsible agency have an obligation to make sure that your bases are covered with respect to the extent of your authority. And so ultimately, you know, it comes down to you have your own duty to fulfill, and you have your own obligation to ensure that your own record for your approval of a project is supported by substantial evidence. And so that gets us to the next slide, where I'll talk about what the standard, what substantial evidence is. And it is actually defined in the CEQA guidelines. It's what you would expect: fact, reasonable assumptions predicated upon facts, or or expert opinion supported by facts. So what that means is that sometimes, even though quite a lot of our projects are considered or determined to be exempt from CEQA, they still nonetheless sometimes require quite a lot of technical analysis, which is the reason for some of the size of the reports that you see for these individual projects that you approve each month. And so we can't simply throw up our hands and say, well, it's similar enough to other projects, and you know, we'll just kind of tick boxes and go on our way. You actually need to develop a fairly robust record in some instances, particularly for the types of exemptions that we are applying, as well as the exceptions, the potential exceptions to those exemptions. In order to prove that those exceptions do not apply, sometimes quite a lot of technical analysis is needed. So then that segues us into Grace's explanation of her role in developing that technical evidence.
Great, thanks, Sabrina. So I'm going to go over a biological desktop review process that we do for these reports. The biological desktop review is the first step of MWPA's process in assessing a project to determine what type of CEQA permitting is appropriate. So the goal of the desktop review is to basically identify what sensitive resources have the potential to be there, whether they have the potential to be impacted by the project, and then just to summarize those two items and to provide justification for those. So a desktop review is not a replacement for a biological field review. If a desktop review concludes that the project is not categorically exempt from CEQA, then a full environmental review process might be necessary. Surveys may also be required by the project design features as part of the CEQA exemption or whatever document is provided. So this is just the first step. All right, so here's a brief list of some of the sources that we use. We use a wide variety of databases, published literature, and all sorts of sources that are specific to the resources we're looking at. So if you want a full list of sources, I highly recommend that you check out the document that's been published for that specific project, usually the categorical exemption. All right, next slide, please. Here's a brief overview of the process of a biological desktop review for sensitive resources. This is basically the minimum steps that are required, and it should be noted that we might conduct additional steps if there's extra resources or something is really detailed. All right, so next slide. So let's start with step one. Project location is reviewed and verified. This involves contacting the project owner, the landowner, verifying jurisdictions, and then just looking at the basic satellite imagery and identifying the obvious sensitive resources. Then we dive into step two for baseline habitat assessment. This usually starts with a review of the riparian resources. So you can see our riparian resource map on this slide here from the South San Pedro Mountain project. We look at a lot of different resources to identify potential and actual wetlands, streams, rivers, lakes, and everything like that. All right, next slide. Continuing the baseline habitat assessment, after we look at the riparian resources that are present, we also examine the habitat data, the other habitat data in addition to riparian. This includes a review of the Golden Gate National Park Conservancy's fine scale habitat data. That's what you're looking at here on the right. This is an extremely detailed habitat layer that the GDNPC has provided to us, and we've found it to be very accurate. We've also field verified this data a few times. Sometimes we don't publish this in the CADEX because this data is so detailed that you need to be pretty zoomed in to actually read it very, very easily, but we're always looking at this. I will also be reviewing things like CDFW's Veg Camp, sensitive natural community data. This data is really most helpful in the western part of Marin. Some parts of Marin County, it's not a complete data set. We also look at soils data. We look at especially serpentine soil because the soil helps to support a lot of sensitive plants. And we look at US Fish and Wildlife designated critical habitat. We look at a lot of other habitat data too, but those are the really big ones. All right, next slide, please. So once we have a good framework of what types of habitats we're likely to encounter in the project area, we then dive into the sensitive species data that is available. So we start with broader databases like IPAC, the CNP or California Native Plant Society 9-Quad search and Conservation Lands Network Explorer tool. These tools help us to create a really large list of species, but they usually have a really big geographic area that they apply to. So usually we can filter it down a bit after that. Then we dive into the California Natural Diversity Database, which we call CNDDB. This is a really powerful database you might have heard of before. It's managed by CDFW, and that's what you're looking at on the right. I believe this is the wildlife data for Mill Valley. We download this data, we look at it in ArcGIS, and we filter it down to a 3-mile buffer just to deal with a manageable amount of data. We cut out species that have no special status, such as like insects and things like that that might be in the database. We also cut out species that are extirpated or no longer considered to be present there, and really old occurrences that are not considered to be reliable. And then we break this data into 3 maps: wildlife, plants, and northern spotted owl. And that's because the northern spotted owl data is so broad, it's just helpful to hold it separate than the rest of the wildlife. So final step, number 4, we summarize these results into a table with supplemental maps. Here's a little clip of the table. These tables are very large, and they're summarized in the categorical exemptions that you can look at that are published on MWPA's website. And also these finalized maps are exported to a PDF and published alongside that data. So if you're ever wondering why we came to a certain resource conclusion, it can usually be found in this table. It's tables 1 and 2 in most of the CAT X's. So, thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any individual questions about the process that go into greater detail.
Thanks so much, Grace. So as you can see, a lot of thought goes into each one of our projects. Each project is evaluated individually according to its location, activities proposed within that area. And of course, we have an awesome team working on this with us. You've met Sabrina Teller previously with Remy Moose Family. We wanted to give Grace Manel with Sequoia Ecological Consulting some FaceTime as well. She's a great biologist and is working with Panorama as a sub-consultant. So we'd be happy to answer any high-level questions. If you'd like to dig into any particular projects, we probably don't have time for that today, but I'd be happy to hop on a call with you at some point to answer very specific questions. And also, I invite you to contact me with any ideas for future information items. I'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, team. So let's see, it's 5 o'clock, and I know that we're going to lose a couple people, but very quickly, do we have questions for the board or questions that can be submitted in writing also? So Barbara, please.
Just quickly, number 1, I think it was a great presentation, and I think providing it to the board and posting on our website potentially. But I'm one of the people that asked this question because my experience has been, if you're a responsible agency, you don't do anything separate. If you don't like what the lead agency's doing, you take over as lead. So one of the things that Sabrina answered to me is explained why we did that. And I understand more fully now. But the other thing that Sabrina, I believe, pointed out to me was that there's also a potential, I don't know if statute of limitations is the right characterization for the timing of a challenge. And so and Sabrina, maybe you can just share that piece is to me pretty critical that might be a good thing to add to that presentation is a little slide on that, because I think you pointed out that if the responsible agency doesn't do a supplement, that if we do a supplement, then that sort of sets a trigger of a certain time frame. But if we don't, then it's much longer. Could you just share that with the board? I think that's a pretty important piece.
Sure. The statutes of limitations under CEQA are generally governed by whether or not you filed a notice of determination or notice of exemption or not. If you prepare a negative declaration or an EIR, you must file a notice of determination that kicks off a 30-day statute of limitations. When you approve projects that are exempt, the filing of a notice of exemption is optional, but it's generally a good idea because it's posted for 30 days, but it triggers a 35-day statute of limitations. If you do not file a notice of exemption, then the default statute of limitations is 180 days, 6 months from the date that you approved whatever it is that somebody wants to challenge. And so for that reason, that's why we generally are filing a notice of exemption each time that MWPA approves an exempt project in order to get some more certainty for those projects and not kind of leave ourselves hanging out there and maybe being subject to a lawsuit, months after the project is approved.
It might be a good thing to add just one page on that. So thank you very much for explaining that, Sabrina.
Thanks, Barbara. That is an important point. And Julie, please.
Just really fast, I'm just wondering, Anne, maybe you could bring forward at the next board meeting kind of the range of the amount of time that's spent to deal with all the environmental issues on maybe a simple project, a medium project, and a complex project, just so that we have an understanding of how much time is being spent by staff as well as outside lawyers and consultants.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Anne. Other board members? Any questions, comments? We do need to take public comment. Any public comment on this item?
Is there anyone at this time wishing to speak on this item? Please raise your hand. Seeing none at this moment, thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and all. Any further discussion? Board, thank you so much. Let's move on to item 12 and team, Anne and team, Sabrina, all of you, your work has been spectacular. And we know that you have our best interests, Marin's environmental best interests in your hearts. And thank you so much. We look forward to continuing to work with you. Let's move on to item 12, which is board members' requests regarding future agenda items. Any future agenda item requests, please? Oh, wait, hold on. You're not a board member, Mark.
I'm speaking on behalf of Director McEntee, who had to leave for a city council meeting.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
She suggests perhaps a future educational item could be discussing everything that's going on in the realm of insurance with IBHS inspections, private or the insurance companies wanting to do inspections as well. And also perhaps readdressing our legislative advocacy role with the MWPA.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. That's an excellent, timely topic. Any other suggestions? Okay, seeing none, I'll now adjourn the meeting. I'll see you all at the next board meeting on February 17th. It's 5:06 p.m. on January 20th, 2022. Thank you so much.
Does anybody know if Gabe had a baby?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Gabe is, I don't know if Gabe is, Gabe,